The judge leaned forward when my attorney said we had one more piece of evidence. My husband, Daniel Marsh, sat 12 feet to my left, looking like a man who'd already mentally spent his settlement money. He had that lazy confidence of someone who thinks the game is rigged in his favor. His lawyer, Preston Harwick, was adjusting his cufflinks like this whole thing was a formality before a late lunch at some steakhouse where they'd toast to my defeat. Then, my lawyer, Renata Kim, pressed play on the audio file. Daniel's voice filled that courtroom. Not muffled, not unclear. Crystal. Like he was standing at the podium himself, testifying against his own case. Once the divorce is final, she'll be broke within 6 months. She doesn't even know where half the money is. Laughter. His laughter. The kind that comes easy when you think no one important is listening. Preston Harwick's hand stopped moving. Just froze halfway to his water glass. His face went from courtroom tan to the color of printer paper. Daniel stopped breathing. I watched his chest lock up like someone had pulled his power cord, and I didn't look at him. Not yet. I kept my eyes on Judge Raymond Castellano, who had stopped writing and was staring at the speaker like it had just confessed to a crime, because it had. My name is Mara Brennan. I'm 34 years old, and I've lived in Scranton, Pennsylvania, my entire adult life. I work as a senior bookkeeper at a mid-size HVAC distribution company called Thermal Solutions. I make $58,000 a year, which isn't impressive, but it's steady. It pays my half of the mortgage. Or at least, it used to. I married Daniel Marsh when I was 26. We met at a wedding in Carbondale where I caught the bouquet, and he made some joke about fate. He was 31, owned a small but growing electrical contracting business called Marsh & Connolly Electric. 2 trucks, 6 employees, contracts with a few commercial property management companies around Lackawanna County. He was driven, smart with people, and he made me laugh in that specific way where you forget you're supposed to be guarded. We bought a 3-bedroom house in Dunmore for $215,000 in 2018. I handled the household finances. He handled the business. That was always the arrangement, and it worked because I trusted him. Trust is expensive. Nobody tells you that until the bill comes due. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in March, 6 months before that courtroom. I came home from work around 5:45 p.m., and Daniel was sitting at the kitchen island with a stack of papers and a pen. He slid them toward me without looking up. I need you to sign these. I looked down. Divorce papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. His name listed as petitioner. Mine as respondent, like I was being served a lawsuit. What is this? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. He finally looked up, calm, almost bored. It's not working anymore, Mara. You know that. I didn't know that. We'd had arguments, sure. What couple doesn't? But nothing that felt like the end of an 8-year marriage. Nothing that justified legal documents on a Tuesday evening between dinner and Jeopardy. This is how you're doing this? I asked. No conversation? No attempt to work on anything? He sighed like I was being difficult. I've been thinking about this for a while. I didn't want to drag it out. Drag what out? Our marriage? Look. He tapped the papers. I had Preston draw these up. It's a fair split, 40-60. You get 40% of the marital assets, I keep the business, and we move on. I stared at him. 40%? I built the business, Mara. You supported it, sure, but there's a difference. Supported it. Like I was his cheerleader, not his partner. Like the 8 years I spent managing our household, our finances, our life, while he grew his company, counted for nothing. I'm not signing this, I said. His jaw tightened. Don't be stupid. You can't afford a legal fight. That was the first time he said it. That I couldn't afford to fight him. Like poverty was a weapon he could hold over my head until I gave up. I didn't sign. I put the papers on the counter, went upstairs to the guest bedroom, and slept there. That was my first night as a woman living in her own house like a stranger. The next day, I couldn't log into our joint savings account at PNC Bank. Password incorrect. I tried 3 times, got locked out, and had to call the bank. They told me the password had been changed 2 days earlier. I'd need the account holder to reset it. Daniel was the primary account holder. I was just listed as secondary. When I confronted him that night, he said it was a security update, that he'd give me the new password when things calmed down. Things never calmed down. I never got that password. Then he reduced his automatic deposit into our joint checking account. He'd been putting in $4,100 a month. It dropped to $2,200. The mortgage alone was $1,580. Add utilities, insurance, groceries, gas. I had maybe $200 left every month, and I make $58,000 a year. I started skipping lunch to save money, brought instant ramen from home, made it in the break room microwave, ate it at my desk while everyone else went to the diner on Lackawanna Avenue. My coworker, Patrice, asked me one day why I was eating the same noodles 4 days in a row. I told her I was on a budget reset. That's what you say when you can't admit your husband is starving you out of your own marriage. But the worst part wasn't the money. The worst part was the Sunday dinners. Daniel's mother, Lorraine Marsh, hosted them every week at her house in Clarks Summit. Big family tradition. For 8 years, I showed up with a side dish and helped clean up afterward. Lorraine called me sweetheart, remembered my birthday, saved me the corner piece of her lemon cake because she knew it was my favorite. 2 weeks after Daniel served me papers, I showed up to Sunday dinner like I always did. Lorraine opened the door, looked at me, and said, "Daniel didn't tell you? Tell me what? We're keeping things small today, just immediate family." I was immediate family. I'd been immediate family for 8 years. And then I saw her, standing in the kitchen behind Lorraine, holding a glass of white wine and laughing at something Daniel's brother just said. Claire Novak, Daniel's executive assistant, 29 years old, dark blonde hair always pulled into a sleek ponytail, the kind of woman who wore blazers with the sleeves pushed up and somehow made it look effortless. She'd been working for Marsh and Connolly for about 18 months. I'd met her twice. Once at a company holiday party, once when she dropped off some paperwork at the house. She was polite, professional, unremarkable. She was standing in my mother-in-law's kitchen drinking wine like she'd been coming to Sunday dinners for years. Lorraine didn't say anything else. She just gave me this tight, apologetic smile and closed the door. I stood on that porch for a full minute. I could hear them laughing inside. I could smell the pot roast Lorraine made every Sunday. And I realized something that made my hands shake. They'd replaced me. Not just Daniel, the whole family. I'd been erased, and Claire Novak had been photoshopped into my spot like I was never there. I drove to the Sheets on Scranton-Carbondale Highway, parked in the far corner of the lot, and cried so hard I gave myself a headache. The kind of crying where you can't catch your breath, and your face gets hot, and you're glad no one can see you because you don't even look human anymore. When I finally stopped, I stared at the steering wheel and thought about what Daniel said. You can't afford to fight. That's when I decided he was wrong. I work in bookkeeping. I stare at ledgers and receipts and invoices 40 hours a week. I know what legitimate expenses look like. I know when numbers don't add up. And something about Daniel's business had been bothering me for months. The trucks looked old. The equipment was the same. But the revenue, according to the tax returns I'd seen last year, was climbing. Where was the money going? I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I searched for anything related to Marsh and Connolly. Old statements, forwarded invoices, anything. And I found it. A forwarded email from 8 months ago. Daniel had sent it to me by accident, meant for his accountant. Attached was a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize. Allegheny Business Solutions, LLC. It showed deposits totaling $182,000 over 18 months. Transfers from Marsh and Connolly's operating account. The LLC was registered to Daniel's business address, but I'd never heard of it. It wasn't on our tax returns. It wasn't on any disclosure I'd ever seen. When I asked him about it that night, he barely looked up from his laptop. "It's vendor routing," he said. "We funnel certain contracts through an LLC for liability reasons. Preston set it up." Why isn't it on our taxes? It's a pass-through entity, Mara. It's declared differently. You wouldn't understand the structure. There it was again. You wouldn't understand. But I did understand. A pass-through LLC still has to be disclosed, and $182,000 doesn't just disappear into liability protection. I didn't argue. I took a screenshot of that bank statement, saved it to my Google Drive, and filed it away. That shoebox under the bathroom sink that held my first piece of evidence? It was about to get a lot heavier. April bled into May, and Daniel started taking all his business calls in his car. He'd get a call, stand up from the couch, grab his keys, and go sit in his truck in the driveway for 30-40 minutes at a time. One night in early May, he forgot his phone was still connected to the house Bluetooth speaker. I was upstairs folding laundry when I heard his voice come through the speaker in the living room. Clear as a Sunday sermon. She's not going to fight, Preston. She can't afford to. I've made sure of that. Laughter. Preston's voice, tinny through the phone. How long you planning to drag this out? However long it takes. Her savings are gone, joint accounts almost dry. She'll take the settlement or go broke trying to fight me. More laughter. Then Daniel's voice again, quieter but sharper. Claire's been patient, but she's ready to move forward. I just need Mara to sign so we can close this chapter. I stood there holding a towel, barely breathing. He wasn't just divorcing me, he was bankrupting me, on purpose, with a lawyer's help. And Claire Novak, the woman drinking wine in Lorraine's kitchen, wasn't just his assistant. She was the next chapter. I set the towel down, walked downstairs as quietly as I could, and pulled out my phone. I opened the voice memo app and hit record. Then I played the Bluetooth audio out loud while recording it. Not perfect, not forensic grade, but clear enough. I saved it with the date and time, backed it up to 3 different cloud accounts, and I kept folding laundry like nothing had happened. That night, lying in the guest bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something. Daniel thought I was weak because I didn't yell. He thought I was defeated because I didn't fight back visibly. He mistook silence for surrender. That was his first mistake. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I didn't feel sick, but I needed time, and I'd barely used any PTO all year. My boss, Gary, told me to feel better and not to worry about the Henderson account reconciliation until Monday. I drove to a small office building on Mulberry Street in downtown Scranton. 2nd floor. A door with frosted glass that read, Renata Kim, Attorney at Law, Family Law and Asset Protection. I'd found her website 3 weeks earlier while searching divorce lawyer Scranton, PA, affordable, at 2 in the morning on my phone. Her rates weren't the cheapest, but her intake form had a question that stopped me cold. Has your spouse made any unusual financial moves in the past 12 months? I filled out the form right there in her waiting room. When Renata called me back, I brought the shoebox. Inside, the Allegheny Business Solutions bank statement, screenshots of Daniel's reduced deposits into our joint account, a printed transaction history showing the savings password change, the voice memo from the Bluetooth speaker incident, a photo of Claire Novak at Sunday dinner, pulled from Lorraine's Facebook. Renata Kim was 43. Korean-American, sharp as a scalpel, with black-framed glasses and a blazer that looked like it cost more than my car payment. Her office smelled like coffee and lemon furniture polish. On her wall, a framed degree from Penn State Law, and a cross-stitch that said, Gaslight, Gatekeep, Get Wrecked. She listened to the voice memo twice. Then she looked at me and said, He handed you intent. Intent? Intent to defraud. That recording isn't just him being a jerk. It's evidence of deliberate financial manipulation to coerce you into a bad settlement. That changes everything. She opened a legal pad and started making notes. We're filing for full financial discovery. Business records, LLC filings, payroll, everything. And we're going to depose Claire Novak. His assistant? If she's on the payroll, she's a witness. And if she's more than an assistant, she's leverage. Renata didn't charge me for the first consultation. She said women like me, women getting financially strangled by men who think they're too scared to fight back, were exactly why she went into family law. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You're not too emotional to understand money. You're the only one in this marriage who actually does." I paid her retainer that week, $1,500. It wiped out what was left in my personal checking account. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for 2 weeks and skipped my car insurance payment to cover it. But I had a lawyer. And Daniel didn't know. By mid-June, Renata had filed a motion for full financial discovery. That meant Daniel had to turn over every business record, every LLC document, every payroll report, set every bank statement for Marsh and Connolly Electric going back 3 years. His lawyer, Preston Harwick, objected, called it a fishing expedition, said I was trying to harass a legitimate business owner. Judge Castellano denied the objection, granted the motion. The documents arrived in July. Renata and I sat in her office with 200 pages of bank statements, payroll records, and tax filings spread across the table like a financial crime scene. And the pattern was unmistakable. First, Allegheny Business Solutions. It wasn't vendor routing. It was a shell company. No employees, no vendors, no services. Just a P.O. box in Wilkes Barre and a bank account that Daniel controlled. Over 2 years, he'd moved $227,000 from Marsh and Connolly into that LLC, declared none of it on our joint tax returns. Second, Claire Novak was on the payroll. She listed as Brand Development Director. Salary, $5,200 per month. She'd been collecting that salary for 19 months. I pulled up the Marsh and Connolly website on my phone. It was the same site from 2019. Same logo, same outdated photos, same Contact Us form that nobody had updated since before COVID. There was no brand development. There were, however, Venmo transactions. Daniel to Claire. 14 payments over 9 months. Captions like dinner reimbursement and client event, totaling $8,300. Third, Lorraine Marsh, Daniel's mother, was listed as a consultant. Strategic Business Advisory, paid $2,000 per month for 16 months. I looked up at Renata. What does she advise him on? Sunday dinners, apparently. Lorraine Marsh had never worked in electrical contracting. She'd been a substitute teacher for 30 years before retiring in 2017. She had no business expertise, no consulting credentials, no deliverables. She was being paid $32,000 to be loyal. The $2,000 a month suddenly made sense. Lorraine hadn't just chosen her son over me. She'd been incentivized. Fourth, expense reports. Thousands of dollars written off as business development and contractor meetings. Hotels in the Poconos, dinners at upscale restaurants in Philadelphia, plane tickets to Miami. I cross-referenced the dates with Claire's Instagram. She'd posted photos from the same hotels, same restaurants, same Miami trip. Always vague captions like, working hard or hardly working. The company was paying for their relationship. Renata leaned back in her chair and said, "We need an expert." An expert? Forensic accountant. Someone who can testify that these expenses aren't legitimate, that the LLC is fraudulent, and that your husband systematically moved marital assets to prevent equitable distribution. She recommended someone. Deepak Chaudhary, CPA, forensic accounting specialist out of Allentown. He charged $8,000 for a full audit and court testimony. I didn't have $8,000. I had $340 in my checking account and half a jar of peanut butter. Renata saw my face and held up a hand. "We'll add it to the petition. If we win, he pays your legal fees. All of them." I signed the contract. Deepak Chaudhary was 62, spoke with a slight Indian accent, and had the energy of a man who genuinely loved spreadsheets. He worked fast. Within 3 weeks, he delivered a 29-page report that read like a murder confession. Key findings: Marsh and Connolly Electric's actual annual revenue, $680,000. Daniel's claimed business valuation in the divorce filing, $290,000. Deepak's appraised value based on actual revenue and assets, $620,000. The $227,000 moved to Allegheny Business Solutions. Fraudulent asset transfer. no business purpose, created solely to hide marital income. Claire's $5,200 monthly salary? Textbook ghost payroll. No work product, no job description, no managerial oversight, just payments to someone Daniel was sleeping with. Lorraine's $2,000 monthly consulting fee? Same story. Fabricated position, no records of meetings, no deliverables, no contracts. The expense reports? Personal use of business funds, trips, dinners, hotels for Daniel and Claire, all written off to reduce taxable business income. Yours Deepak estimated that Daniel had hidden or misappropriated over $310,000 in marital assets over 3 years. Renata sat across from me and said, "This isn't a divorce case anymore. This is fraud." But we still needed one more thing. Proof of intent. Not just that he did it, that he meant to do it, that he planned it. And I already had it. The voice memo. The Bluetooth recording from May. Daniel's own words. "She can't afford to fight. I've made sure of that." That wasn't strategy. That was coercion. That was intent. But I wanted more. In late August, Marsh & Connolly held its annual anniversary party. 5 years in business. Daniel rented out a banquet room at the Radisson in Dixon City, invited clients and employees, open bar, catered food, the whole thing. I wasn't invited. But Claire was. And Lorraine. And Preston Harwick. He's his lawyer, who apparently attended social events with his clients. I thought about crashing it. Thought about walking in and making a scene. But that's not how you win. You win by being smarter. The party started at 7 p.m. I drove to the Radisson at 8:45, parked 3 rows back from the entrance, and waited. I wasn't planning to go inside. I just wanted to see. At 9:30, people started filtering out to the smoking area near the side entrance. Daniel came out with Claire and Preston. All 3 of them had drinks. Daniel was laughing, loud and loose. He'd been drinking. I opened my phone, started a voice memo, and cracked my car window. The audio quality wasn't great, but it was enough. Preston's voice joking, "How long you think this thing drags out?" Daniel louder, "Couple more months maybe. She'll cave. Judges don't give a shit about women who never worked in the business." Claire laughed. "Is she really that stubborn?" Daniel, "Stubborn and broke. I cut off her access to everything. By the time this goes to court, she won't have money for a lawyer." Preston chuckling, "Stick to the $290,000 valuation. She won't know how to challenge it." Daniel, "And if she tries, we drag it out. File motions, request extensions, make it expensive. She'll be bankrupt before we even get a trial date." They clinked glasses. I sat in my car, hands shaking, and stopped the recording. I had it. Not anger, not spite. Intent. Deliberate, calculated, criminal intent. I backed up the file to 4 different cloud accounts. Emailed it to myself. Texted it to my sister in Pittsburgh. I wasn't taking any chances. That recording was a nuclear bomb. San and I was going to drop it in the middle of Daniel Marsh's courtroom. September came. Renata filed a motion to admit the recordings as evidence. Preston objected, called them inadmissible, claimed they violated wiretapping laws. Pennsylvania is a 2-party consent state. That means you can't record someone without their knowledge. Except, there's an exception for recordings made in places where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy, like a parking lot, or a living room where someone's voice is playing over a shared Bluetooth speaker in a marital home. Judge Castellano ruled in our favor. Both recordings were admissible. Preston tried to settle, offered 50-50, then 55-45 in my favor. Renata told him no. We were going to trial. October 12th. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No jury, just Judge Castellano at the bench, a court reporter, and a handful of people in the gallery. Daniel sat at the defense table in a charcoal suit, freshly dry-cleaned. Claire sat in the second row directly behind him. She'd dressed down, business casual, trying to look professional instead of mistress-like. Lorraine sat on the far left, hands folded in her lap, not looking at me. Preston opened with the same argument he'd been making for months. I didn't contribute to the business. I didn't take financial risk. I deserved a fair share, but fair didn't mean equal. He painted Daniel as a hard-working entrepreneur who built something from nothing while I provided emotional support. Emotional support. Like 8 years of managing a household, paying bills, coordinating our lives, Soden keeping everything running while he focused on his business was somehow less valuable than wiring circuits. Renata stood up and didn't waste time. She introduced Deepak Chaudhary's forensic report, showed the $227,000 transfer to the Shell LLC, showed the ghost payroll payments to Claire, showed the fabricated consulting fees to Lorraine. Preston objected to every exhibit. Overruled, overruled, overruled. Then Renata called Claire Novak to the stand. Claire walked up looking calm, but her hands were shaking. Renata asked her to describe her job duties at Marsh & Connolly. I assist with client coordination, scheduling, some administrative tasks. Brand development? Occasionally. Can you provide an example of a brand development project you completed in the last 12 months? Silence. Ms. Novak? I worked on updating marketing materials. Which materials? General outreach. Renata pulled up the Marsh & Connolly website on a laptop connected to the courtroom monitor. Same site from 2019, same photos, same outdated contact form. This is the current website, is it not? Claire swallowed. Yes. When did you last update it? I'm not responsible for the website. What are you responsible for? She hesitated. Administrative tasks. For $5,200 a month? No answer. Renata thanked her and sat down. Then she called Lorraine Marsh. Lorraine looked smaller on the stand. Her hands twisted in her lap as Renata asked her to describe her consulting work for Marsh & Connolly. I provided strategic guidance. On what? Business operations. Customer relations. Do you have a background in electrical contracting? No. Business management? No. How many consulting meetings did you have with your son in the last 16 months? Lorraine's voice got quieter. It was informal. How many? I don't have an exact number. Renata showed the payroll records. $2,000 a month, 16 months, $32,000 total. Can you provide invoices, reports, or documentation of any consulting work you performed? I didn't keep formal records. Because there was no work to document, was there? Preston objected. Judge Castellano overruled. Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. I was helping my son. For $2,000 a month. She didn't answer. Renata sat down. Then came the recordings. Renata stood and said, Your Honor, we'd like to submit Exhibit 24. Preston stood up immediately. Objection. This is already ruled admissible, Counselor, Judge Castellano said. Proceed. Renata pressed play. The first recording. Daniel's voice from the Bluetooth speaker in May. She's not going to fight, Preston. She can't afford to. I've made sure of that. The courtroom went silent. Daniel's face went pale. Preston's pen stopped moving. How long you planning to drag this out? However long it takes. Her savings are gone. Joint accounts almost dry. She'll take the settlement or go broke trying to fight me. Claire stopped moving. Her hands were frozen on the armrest. Claire's been patient, but she's ready to move forward. I just need Mara to sign so we can close this chapter. Lorraine put her hand over her mouth. Judge Castellano leaned forward, staring at the speaker. Then the second recording. The parking lot at the Radisson. She won't know how to challenge it. And if she tries, we drag it out. File motions, request extensions, make it expensive. She'll be bankrupt before we even get a trial date. The laughter, the clinking glasses. When it ended, the silence felt like pressure in my ears. Daniel tried to stand. Preston grabbed his wrist and hissed, Sit down. Judge Castellano replayed the second recording. The part about bankrupting me? Then he looked at Preston Harwick. "Counselor, does your client wish to make a statement?" Preston looked at Daniel. Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "No, Your Honor." Judge Castellano took off his glasses and set them on the bench. "This court has reviewed the financial records, the forensic accounting report, and the audio evidence submitted by the petitioner. The findings are not ambiguous." He looked at Daniel. "Mr. Marsh engaged in deliberate dissipation of marital assets through fraudulent transfers to a shell company. He created fictitious employment positions to funnel marital funds to a romantic partner and a family member. He systematically restricted his spouse's access to financial resources for the express purpose of coercing an inequitable settlement." Preston tried to interrupt. Judge Castellano held up a hand. "I'm not finished," he continued. "The recordings presented demonstrate not only financial misconduct, but premeditated intent to defraud. This is not a case of poor financial management. This is calculated, strategic manipulation." He put his glasses back on. "Asset division will be 70% to the petitioner, 30% to the respondent. The marital home will be awarded entirely to Ms. Brennan. Marsh and Connolly Electric will undergo an independent valuation based on actual revenue figures, and Ms. Brennan will receive her equitable share." Preston started to speak. Judge Castellano cut him off. "Allegheny Business Solutions, LLC, is frozen effective immediately. All funds will be included in the marital estate." Then his voice got harder. "I am referring this case to the Lackawanna County District Attorney's Office for review of potential perjury charges. Mr. Marsh submitted financial disclosures under oath that were demonstrably false." Daniel's face went white. "I am also referring the payroll records to the IRS for review of potential tax fraud. Ms. Novak and Mrs. Marsh, as recipients of fabricated compensation, I may be included in that review." Claire's composure shattered. Her hands started shaking. She looked at Daniel. He didn't look back. Lorraine was crying silently in the gallery. Judge Castellano closed the file. "This court is adjourned." In the hallway outside the courtroom, Daniel tried to approach me. "Mara, for God's sake! We can fix this. We can work something out." I stopped walking, turned to face him. He looked smaller, desperate. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just looked at him calmly and said, "I already did." Then I walked away. Behind me, I heard Claire's voice, sharp and panicked. "Daniel, what the hell did you get me into?" I didn't turn around. 3 months later, the independent business valuation came back. Marsh and Connolly Electric was worth $615,000, not $290,000. My share, $430,500. The IRS audit took longer. By February, they'd assessed $47,000 in back taxes and penalties against Daniel for underreported income and fraudulent business deductions. Claire resigned from Marsh and Connolly in November. She also received a letter from the IRS requesting documentation of her $5,200 monthly salary and whether she'd properly reported it as income. She hired a tax attorney. Lorraine repaid the $32,000 in consulting fees as part of a settlement to avoid criminal charges. She also stopped hosting Sunday dinners. The family tradition quietly died, and nobody brought it back. Daniel sold one of his work trucks and laid off 2 employees to cover the settlement and legal fees, not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. Preston Harwick never took another case involving hidden assets, at least not that I heard. I kept the house in Dunmore. I refinanced the mortgage in my name only at a better rate. I paid off my car. I put $80,000 into an index fund and didn't touch it. And I started a small side business, financial consulting for women going through divorce, how to find hidden accounts, how to document expenses, how to recognize when someone's lying about money. I charge $150 an hour, and I'm booked out 3 months. Because here's what I learned. The people who think you're too weak to fight are the same people who never see it coming when you do. Daniel thought I was emotional. He thought I couldn't understand money. He thought crying in a Sheetz parking lot meant I was broken. He was wrong. I wasn't broken. I was documenting. And sometimes, late at night when I'm sitting in my quiet house with the mortgage paid, and the heat on, and the fridge full, I think about that moment in the courtroom, when the recording played, when Preston Harwick's face went white, when Daniel stopped breathing. Not because I destroyed him, but because I finally stopped letting him destroy me. Some people call it revenge. I call it accounting.